If you want to learn how to add awesome tension to your story through the perfect placement of chapter breaks, then it's time to go plus ultra! Does this make me a weeb? Hello super friends and welcome back to another episode of Superhero Saturday, where we talk about the arts of superheroes, storytelling, and so much more. And I want to start this video off by saying thank you so much to everyone who recommended My Hero Academia to me in the comments, because y'all were 1000% right. I absolutely love it. I was hooked even from the first episode, which is really saying something. It is quite a bit more anime than I like, and it's not that I don't like anime, it's just that it seems to pull on every single emotional moment. They just milk it for everything that it's got. And from the audience, when I'm watching at home, I can't bring myself to stop at the end of an episode. I have to know what comes next, no matter what it takes. Anyway. There are a ton of things that I could talk about that make this show great, including brilliant character design, professional storytelling and world building, and just all around really cool superhero concepts. But what I really want to talk about today is something that the actual storytelling does between episodes that just makes it so compelling that I just really cannot stop. I can't stop, you guys. Now, this particular aspect of storytelling, learning when to put breaks and chapters, is something that actually does apply to quite a few different serial mediums, whether that is comic books between issues, regular novels between chapters, TV shows between episodes, or even longer movies between, sequels. For now, my primary medium is writing, prose chapter books. So I'm going to be talking about this in terms of chapter breaks, but remember that it can apply to a bunch of different mediums. No matter what type of story they're telling, when an artist tells a story, they do first have to establish the order of events, a basic timeline where one thing happens after another and after another and after another. This creates kind of a history of the story, the actual timing of placement of events. Because if you want to make sure that your audience gets the information that's going on in the proper order, you need to know what goes on first. But that is just the baseline. That is just figuring out what happens in your story. If you want to take it to the next level, then you've got to start thinking about where you're going to place those breaks and where you're going to give your audience that information. This is a way of really adding art to a story in a way that you can't do without having that first timeline figured out. Let's take a basic superhero stock story for an example. Number 1, the hero is on patrol. The city is quiet. All is well. Number 2, a scream in the night. Someone's in danger. The hero searches for the victim and finds a villain robbing a bank or something. Number 3, the hero tells the villain to stop. Number 4, the villain says no and raises the stakes. Number 5, the hero has to stop them, and so the fight begins. Number 6, the hero and villain trade blows. Number 7, the hero looks like they have the upper hand and they will win the day pretty quickly. Number 8, the villain makes a comeback. Number 9, the hero has a moment of fear. They can't underestimate this villain. Number 10, the hero rallies their strength and thinks creatively to strategically get themselves out of this situation with minimal damage. Number 11, the villain realizes they're losing again and starts to panic. They raise the stakes again and do something unthinkable. Number 12, it seems all is lost. The hero is defeated. How can they come back after this? Number 13, this is their last chance. The hero must call on all their power to do what is right, no matter the consequences. Number 14, the hero has won. Police and EMS arrive and the villain is detained. Number 15, consequences from the battle make themselves known. All is mostly well, but things are never really the same again. Again, there's nothing wrong with that, and this is a great way to tell a story because it does have that tension built into it. However, it does require that your reader or your viewer has to go through the whole thing in one slog. So if you choose to go the next level and put in breaks in your story, there's a number of ways you can do that, and you can make the choices to bring the most tension, the most compelling moments out with just the use of chapter breaks. To understand what I'm talking about, let's take another look at this diagram. This is the linear formula broken up visually so that we can see the levels of positive and negative excitement. The further away from 0 that your dot is, the more the audience has to know what's next. It's basically potential energy versus kinetic energy. Whether you're pulling up or down, it does create a different kind of tension. And by understanding this, you can take the time to decide at which point in the curve you want to make that break. And actually, if you've seen this on my channel before, that's because this is my basic storytelling formula. This is really something that works for a big picture, overarching plot through the whole story, and for a small scale, for something as simple as one fight scene. Now, when you're first starting out as an artist, there are a few things that newer artists tend to do. They might blast through the whole retelling of the story and then double back and place chapter breaks kind of wherever they want. You might even just find yourself finding a random word count and placing the chapter break there to try and get all the chapters to be, kind of consistent length, regardless of what kind of action is going on. And again, that's totally fine. You can definitely do that. I know when I was a kid and I used to tell my mom, just let me read one more chapter, it was a lot more convenient for her to say, okay, that's gonna take about 15 minutes, rather than having to come back to me after half an hour and say, I thought you were reading one chapter. And I said, I'm sorry, it was a long one. Hi, baby. You wanna get on the camera again? He's such a kitty cow. He's such a kitty cow. He's such a cutie little kitty cow. The next type of chapter break that most artists do when they're kind of developing this skill of figuring out where to put chapters is to find a natural neutral point to take the break. That's where the action can feel complete, finished, like a mini story has been told and resolved. For our example here, if we were to use this kind of logic to break chapters, we might put breaks here, here, and here at 3B, 7B, and 10B. These are the natural neutral points, and for each of the 4 sections or chapters that they create, you can see a natural sine curve, an up and down for each. For our example, this might be like breaking the chapter just after the hero thinks they've defeated the villain the first time, the second time, the third time, and essentially the 4th time. That's great and all, except that at the end of the chapter, the reader might think that the story has been all wrapped up and not realize that there's more to come until they flip the next page. Again, you can totally do this, and it does make sense to give your readers a little bit of time to breathe at some of these natural neutral points. But if you do it for every single chapter, it can start to feel kind of like the monster of the week trope, where the whole story, every episode or every chapter is just, an inciting incident, a villain to be defeated, and then the fight scene, and then defeated, and everything always goes back to normal at the end of the show. In the end, it just lowers the stakes a lot, it makes everything a lot safer, and it's not as compelling as it could be. Another way that you can do this is kind of the exact opposite of this, by breaking those chapters at the highest points of tension, especially on the negative side. This means breaking at points 4, 8, and 12, when things look the bleakest, and it really seems like the hero has failed and there's no coming back from this. Now, these are arguably the most exciting moments of the story because we really don't know what's going to happen next, so it does make sense to try and break chapters at these points. This is where the audience is least certain about the next outcome. And that's why this style of chapter break tends to work so well when used properly, because they're really on the very edge of their seats. There are plenty of stories out there that use this style of chapter break to great effect. Anyone who's read the Heroes of Olympus series by Rick Riordan knows exactly how much of a cliffhanger this can be and what it can do to a fan base. However, if you use it all the time, in my opinion, it's not as strong. It can especially lose some of its potency if the issue that you set up at the very end of the previous chapter is resolved really quickly in the next. When it happens like that, where you basically just resolve it every time the cold open wraps up before the opening credits, then it can feel like you're purposefully trying to mess with the audience's emotion for no reason other than to stir things up. And that doesn't feel so good. Like, come on guys, don't toy with us like that all the time. That's why the last style of chapter breaks, I think, works so well. And this is what My Hero Academia, the TV show, has done really well. In this style of chapter break, you stop the chapter at points 3, 7, and 10, and in most instances, also point number 13. By splitting chapters here, what you do is you build up the tension throughout the whole episode, you come up to the climax, and then you release, and then stop right before the issue resolves and splats all over the floor. This might not sound like it's very much different than the previous version of chapter breaks that I explained, but the impact is huge. The audience gets that high action, excited, ecstatic moment right before something happens, but then cuts the scene right before we see what actually unfolds. For our example, the hero rallies all that's left of his strength and delivers that final punch. But is the villain KO'd? We don't know. We have to see the next chapter in order to find out what happens in that last moment. What's happening energy-wise in this example is that we've changed the trajectory of the tension. We're currently heading back to zero. We've built up all that potential energy and are just now starting to fall back into kinetic energy. We are activating all of that built up energy and power and tension that we've created the whole episode. And by turning the energy point and starting the release, but not getting there, we're not allowing the audience to go all the way back to zero. There's still quite a bit more that has to happen, and we haven't seen the consequences of this change of events yet. It can actually be quite frustrating for the audience, but in a good way, most of the time, because we totally want to see what's coming next. Not just what happens in the final minutes of the battle, but what happens because of the battle, the consequences and things like that. It doesn't just automatically resolve in the first few seconds. There's actually a really great reward in the first half of the next chapter or episode. It doesn't just provide resolution to the conflict, but actually lets us see what happens around it, the consequences that follow. Now, like most of the advice that I give on this channel for creators and artists out there is, of course, not to just stick to one thing. The best way to use chapter breaks in an artistic way is to mix it up. In my opinion, it is best to actually throw your audience a bone every now and then and give them a neutral ending. And then when it's a really big moment, you can throw your characters off a cliff and cut to black. At the very least, however, all together, if you just take the time to think about where to cut your chapters in maybe different places than a natural neutral, then you'll be able to get some variety and get even more artistry out of it. And that will make your audience even more invested in your storytelling. I hope this advice was helpful for you guys, and thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and give us a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more superheroic and storytelling content. You can also see my superhero characters in action and see the way that I cut chapters in my books on our website at www.fearless9.com. Thanks again, super friends, and we'll see you next time.